emotions are just energy in motion and they just want to move. And when they don't move, when they get stuck in the body or suppressed, then it causes all sorts of symptoms like anxiety or chronic overthinking, negative thought spirals, self-doubt, procrastination, lack of motivation, trouble sleeping. The funny thing is, when you actually feel the emotions, those things go away, but it's the resistance to the emotion that causes all of those symptoms that we actually don't like. Welcome to Reclaiming Consciousness. I'm Elise Bassine, trauma and breathwork expert and creator of the Metamorphosis Method, the only methodology bridging the gap between spiritual healing and clinical trauma work. For many years, our consciousness has been hijacked by societal and cultural programming, religion, the media, and familial and ancestral trauma. In this podcast, you'll discover my unique perspective on trauma healing and how it is the gateway to fully reclaiming your consciousness. You'll hear stories and teachings that expand your mind as you discover how every relationship challenge, business block, or limiting pattern is an invitation to reclaim the parts of your consciousness you unknowingly gave away. Get ready to go deep. Now let's dive in. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the show. Today, I'm doing a solo episode about why we have fears or blocks or feel somewhat scared or trepidatious about doing this work. And, this is something that is really common. And I talked about it a little bit in my masterclass around how I use breath work to heal trauma and heal core wounds. And we talked about the nature of breath work and how it's confronting and why so many people have resistance to it. And I wanted to speak to that today because I had a chance yesterday to be with one of my clients in person. She was visiting from out of town and we spent the day together and we did an in-person breathwork session. And she mentioned something to me about, we've been working together for a long time, but she said that before we started working together and even after she had joined the Metamorphosis and the Mothership, she still had a lot of resistance to getting on the calls and specifically getting on a private call with me because of just the nature of this work being really confronting and the fears around the unknown of like, what's going to happen when I look at this stuff and I process my emotions, like, who am I going to be on the other side? And I think that sometimes, obviously, we can have fear or feel confronting to face uncomfortable emotions or look at things from the past. However, sometimes I think the fear or the trepidation can be more around, well, who am I going to be on the other side? And not really knowing who that version of you is. And then also, along with that, which I think is the most important thing, is the fear of, well, what am I going to lose on the other side? And it's funny because a couple of weeks ago, I was talking to another client who said she did the certification and she's now seeing clients. And she said that one of her clients brought up that the reason why she had resisted the work for so long was because she was afraid that she was going to have to leave her partner. And I think these are all really common fears that we have because if we change, quote unquote, then we are like, well, will people not want to be friends with us anymore? Will our partner still want to be with us? And the immediate fear, maybe not consciously, but unconsciously, is what am I going to lose? And how will I get hurt as a result of this? And I think that part of that comes from this deep coping mechanism or survival mechanism that we all created in childhood, which was to have to in some way abandon ourselves or become something different in order to get our needs met. So, for example, in childhood, if you knew that you had to show up in a certain way around your parents, maybe it was being overly tuned into their needs or trying to be the mediator or thinking that if you just are perfect or good enough, then they'll finally notice you or pay attention to you or recognize you or not acknowledge you. Then we learn, or you learned from a very early age, that in order to get your needs met, you had to be a certain version of yourself. And then deep inside, you also have this knowing that, well, if I am fully myself, if I fully step into my power, then I'm not going to get my needs met, or I'm going to lose love or lose connection, and ultimately not survive, because all of these coping mechanisms that we create in childhood in order to get our needs met are ultimately survival mechanisms, right? And we ultimately associate this version of yourself that you're currently being, even though you might know that it's not fully authentic or you're not in your full power, you still associate that version of you with survival. There's a part of you that still believes from childhood that if you show up in this certain way, then you will get your needs met and you will ultimately survive. And not only do we do that with our parents, but then we will end up also projecting that coping mechanism or that reality or that perspective onto our relationships, your relationship with your partner, your relationships with your close friends or family. And this is something that is largely unconscious, but I really wanted to speak to this because I think it's one of the biggest reasons why you might feel resistance to this work, or you might, think that you want to do it, but then ultimately don't pull the trigger, or, you're afraid to really dive deep into it because you're like, well, what's going to happen? And it's funny because I had a woman who recently came into the mothership, which is my 12-month membership. And she said something similar right in the beginning, was like the biggest thing that was stopping her, the biggest fear that she had before she pulled the trigger was the unknown, right? Not knowing who she was going to be on the other side, and that being scary. And the truth is, you don't know exactly who you're going to be on the other side. But I think what happens is you get to this point where you're so tired of doing the same thing over and over again, and you're so tired of feeling the same way over and over again that you're like, okay, I'm willing to dive into the unknown because I know I can't stay here. And I've had those moments in my own life as well that I fully remember having that feeling. One of them was when I was contemplating leaving my job when I was a school counselor. I was a school counselor for about 10 years. And then I started my business in January of 2020, and which most of you have heard the story. And then obviously COVID happened. So I was still working as a school counselor remotely and running my business. And, I got to this point where it was a really interesting place to be because logically it made sense for me to stay at my job and build my business at the same time, because my job, I was getting paid, I had health insurance, blah, 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 even though you don't get paid very much as an educator, sadly, which is a whole other topic. But I was still, had that steady paycheck and the benefits and all of that stuff. And because we were working virtually, I really didn't have to work that much. I think it only ended up being a couple hours a day that I really had to be fully focused on that. So technically, I still had ample time to be building my business, working in the business, working on the business, all of those things. But what ended up happening is the frequency that I had to be in to run my business, the energetic frequency I had to be in to run my business, was so different from the frequency that I was in as a school counselor that it started to take so much energy for me to go back and forth between those two frequencies. And it started to feel so uncomfortable that I was like, okay, even though initially I had thought I'd want to stay at my job until I was making X amount of money in my business, and that was like logical or made sense, I also started to see that I wouldn't be able to get to that level while I was still a school counselor, because the energies were so different, and it was just so incongruent, right? And not to say that being a school counselor was bad, but it was just like the energy that I had to be in, and just like the frequency of the school district of Philadelphia, like the school system in general, the way that everything was, like the level of consciousness. And this is like not a judgment at all. It's just like the way that it is. It was so different than the energy I had to be in to run my business. It was so uncomfortable that I had to make a change. And even though, like I said, I wasn't necessarily making the money in my business that I would have needed in order for it to make sense to leave my job, I just knew energetically that I had to. And my jobs just started to feel so uncomfortable more and more each day. And I remember my friend Ed was like, you're at the point where you're like a baby chick breaking out of the egg. And it's like, they have to break out of the egg because they're growing so much. And also, I think also when like baby chicks hatch out of the egg, part of the reason is because like if they don't, like it gets filled up with poop. And if they don't break out of the egg, they'll die. Which is kind of crazy, but I totally resonated with that in that moment, because it was kind of like, even though it's so hard to break out of that egg and break through the shell and come out, like it feels almost impossible, staying in felt even more impossible. And it's almost like coming through the birth canal, right? And also like when you're a mom having a baby, it's like you get to this point where you're like, oh my gosh, this is so hard. Can I actually do this? But then also there's this feeling that you get to where you're like, I don't have a choice. Like this is happening and I just have to do it. As hard as it seems, it's like there's no other way, because I can't stay where I am, right? Like when you're having a baby or you're the baby coming out, there's no choice. Like you can't stay in the womb anymore, or else you will get sick or you won't survive or whatever it is. So it's like this point of, even though feels scary and hard and confronting, the other way is just not tenable anymore. I just can't do it anymore. And that's how I felt when I was leaving my job, because it felt incredibly scary because I didn't have savings. I wasn't making that much money in my business. And my husband at the time wasn't in a position to help me. And I remember when I told him that I was leaving, he was like, at first he was very against it. And then I basically was like, I need to do this and, you need to get on board. And his thing was like, well, as long as you continue to pay for our health insurance, because I was currently paying for the health insurance. So on top of leaving my job, I also had committed to now paying another, like, I don't know how much it was, like $1,000 a month or something for health insurance, which at the time was like a lot of money for me. So I was definitely scared. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I just knew energetically that I needed to. And that even though that felt scary, staying was just not comfortable anymore. It felt so wrong. I share that to say that was like one of those catalyzing moments for me that forced me into the work in a whole new way. But it's like this point where even though the work feels scary and even though it feels confronting and you have resistance to it, you just get to the point where you're like, I can't stay where I am, And I think those kind of moments that will catalyze people into this work. But what my client said to me yesterday that really rung bells is, I think that it's very common to have these fears around who you'll become and what will be required of you. And I know that sometimes I can feel when people have resistance, even if we have like a call scheduled or something like that. And I had this happen a few times recently too, where people would like reschedule a call with me because they're like, I don't feel ready for this call. And I'm like, you don't have to be ready. Like, it's okay. But I think really what happens is they don't feel ready to fully look at what is going to be required of them or what they have to face in order to get to where they want to go. And that's completely normal. And, I still have resistance around doing breath work at times because breath work can be confronting and this work can be confronting. And I, for one, have always hated confrontation. Not so much of confronting myself, I guess, but confronting other people. And I think it can feel scary to confront yourself, and when you do the breath work, that's what it is. You are breathing and you are being present with what's there, like what emotions are in your body, what emotions have been stuck and are now ready to be processed. And that can feel scary and confronting. But the interesting thing is that sometimes, actually all the time, the resistance to the emotion is actually more uncomfortable than the emotion itself. Because once you access the emotion and feel it and let it move, it really only lasts for like a minute or a minute and a half, and then it moves because emotions are just energy in motion and they just want to move. And when they don't move, when they get stuck in the body or suppressed, then it causes all sorts of symptoms like anxiety or chronic overthinking or negative thought spirals, self-doubt, procrastination, lack of motivation, trouble sleeping, all of those things. The funny thing is, when you actually feel the emotions, those things go away, but it's the resistance to the emotion that causes all of those symptoms that we actually don't like. So I always make the joke too. It's like, yes, you might be afraid to face what it is you need to face in order to get to the other side, but you're already feeling it anyway. It's just showing up in a different way. You might as well just fully face it and move through it. And then what happens on the other side is always 100 times better. And yes, you can't always predict what is going to come up or what it's going to look like on the other side. But what I can always predict is that it's going to be worlds better than where you were at before. Truth be told, like sometimes you do lose people from your life. Sometimes friendships will fade away, or people who you were once close to don't like this version of you, or it makes them uncomfortable. And those things aren't fun. But at the same time, again, it goes back to that survival mechanism of like, do you decide to keep yourself in this version of you in order to make other people happy so that you can feel safe and feel like you're getting your needs met? Or do you choose yourself and become the version of yourself that you know you're meant to be, or the version of yourself that is in your power, happy, confident, living the life you want to live, and maybe making people uncomfortable? Or do you choose to stay in that spot so that everyone else is comfortable, right? And of course, like when you put it that way, we all know that you want to choose yourself, right? It just feels hard because we associate that smaller self with survival. And so when you choose this other version of you and you start to do the work, it can literally feel like you're going to die. And I've had that feeling so many times, I can't even tell you. And it is scary. However, when you have the support of an expert and someone who's skilled at it and a container where everyone's going through the same thing, it's the best circumstances to move through those uncomfortable feelings and come out on the other side into what it is that you truly want, And a lot of times for the clients that I work with, that means growing their business, starting a business, showing up differently in their relationships where they feel like they're able to say what they need, say what they want, express themselves, be seen and heard, be truthful, be honest, because one of the things that I think is ingrained in so many women is this kind of like societal and ancestral programming around self-sacrifice, right? It's like this unconscious programming that we need to sacrifice ourselves in order to be good wives or good mothers or looked at as good people in society. And then what happens is when we're unconsciously running that programming, we will tend to not even be able to access our own feelings. And I've experienced this a lot. And we automatically will abandon ourselves or our own feelings in order to make other people happy, right? Or we unconsciously are operating from this belief that other people's feelings are more important than ours. And then what ends up happening is you end up feeling resentful or irritated, or you feel like angry at your partner all the time because you're like, oh, well, they don't care about my feelings. And it's like, well, you're not requiring them to, And I think that's one of the biggest themes that I'm seeing for a lot of the women I'm working with, and myself too, is breaking this ancestral programming of self-sacrifice, right? And in order to create a business or the type of relationships that you truly desire, you are required to be operating from your power, and you are required to value yourself in a way where you have to break this programming of self-sacrifice and of believing unconsciously that your feelings aren't as important as your partners or your kids or your families or, whoever it is that you're close to. And this is something I think that happens a lot unconsciously. And I know for me in my own journey, it's been something that I continue to uncover deeper layers of it that I wasn't conscious of before. Deeper layers of ways that I wasn't saying the truth of how I feel or believing that I had to do something even though it didn't feel good to me because that's what is expected or that's what you should do as a mom or a wife or whatever. And I'm not saying that you need to not care about anyone else and make everything about yourself. I think there's a lot of nuance to it and there's a balance. But if you are operating from this foundational perspective of valuing yourself and your feelings and your needs and your desires, then you get to come from this place of choosing how you want to show up, who you want to show up for, what you're available for, what your boundaries are without continuously feeling like you are running on empty because you are putting everyone else before you and you are never getting what you need. Not only you're not asking for it, you're operating from the belief that it doesn't matter or it's not important. And when you're operating from that belief, not only will you not think it's important, but no one else will either. And I think that's why we end up getting burnt out, or we end up carrying this mental load for everybody or holding everyone else's emotions. And that's just not sustainable. I can tell you from experience. So that's just one of the themes that I'm seeing. And I kind of went off on a little tangent there, but I share that to say some of the things that come up and why this work can feel confronting or scary because there's a lot tied to it. There's a lot tied to your transformation. And I think that sometimes we want the benefits of the transformation, to start your own business or make more money or get the relationship you want. But when it comes to really doing the work to show up as that person who receives that, that's where it can feel really scary because you have to become a different version of you, one who values yourself first and foremost. And that can feel confronting because it can feel like if you value yourself first, then you're going to lose something. And ultimately, it's a threat to your survival. It can feel unsafe and it can feel dangerous. Yesterday, when I was talking to my client, she was like, yeah, I did not want to get on a call with you for the longest time because I was afraid of what I was going to have to face and then what was going to happen on the other side. And that brings me also to this idea of the unknown. and how we avoid the unknown at all costs. And I think that that is one of the kind of like old programs that runs in society, and just like as humans, we want to know what to expect, right? We want to have certainty of, okay, well, if I sign up for the metamorphosis, for example, what are the results going to be? Can I be certain that I'm going to get what I want? How long is this going to take? I want like to know the outcome, right? And, I always say to people, like, I can guarantee you that if you show up and do the work, you're going to create a transformation. And if you continue doing the work, if you didn't get the result in that 3 months, you'll see that and if you continue, you will get it, right? Worst case scenario. And if you show up and do the work, you will create a transformation, like 100%. Can I tell you exactly what you're going to have to face and exactly what version of you you're going to have to become to get that result? No, because we don't know that until we dive in. And do I know what it's going to feel like for you to become that version of you? No, that's an unknown. And that's why it feels so scary, because the unknown is something that feels confronting. It feels like, well, if I don't have certainty around it, then I don't want to do it because I don't want to face the unknown. But the truth is that the unknown is this incredibly powerful state. It is pure potential. It's pure creativity. It is something that if you create a relationship to it where you can dance with it and you can allow things to unfold without having to control or fix or make the outcome right or wrong or any of those things where we just put our own human arbitrary things on it, like a timeline or a specific thing that we think should show up or whatever it is. When you can dance with the unknown and allow things to unfold and things to show up in the magical way that they do, when you allow things to be the way that they're meant to be, that is power, because then you are not afraid of what could happen, or you're not putting this arbitrary meaning on, well, if this doesn't happen, then it means that I'm not good enough. Or if this doesn't happen in this way, then it means that this isn't working, or I don't deserve this, or whatever it is. But if you dive in with, yes, we focus on a result and I'll get you to the result, but you have to be open to the process of the unknown and being willing to embrace that instead of trying to control it. And I think that that's something that also can be very evocative for people, because this idea of the unknown is scary, but really when you think about it, everything is an unknown. And we try to avoid that fact any way we can by predicting the weather, predicting what's going to happen in 2026, predicting who's going to win the fucking Super Bowl or whatever the hell it is. We always try to make predictions because they make us feel safe if we think we know what's going to happen. But the truth is, you never know what's going to happen. And the more you can get comfortable with that and allow the unfolding to be like this miraculous flow of energy that you can continue to let wow you and surprise you, and you dance with like the synchronicities of life, and you let the universe show you what direction to go and where to go next and what the next step is, and you like let go of whatever you decided was the right way and you just let yourself dance with that energy, that's really when the magic unfolds. I've had it happen so many times where someone will come into, the certification or working privately with me, and they'll be like, I don't know exactly why, but I know I'm meant to do this. And like, those are the people that I love so much because I'm always like, fuck yeah, let's do it. And it's always magic. And usually the reason reveals itself very quickly, but it's like just that willingness to dive into the unknown where you don't have a laundry list of results you want to create and ways that you want to make things happen and timelines and amounts of money and all of these things. And again, I'm not saying those things are bad. I like to make those things too. I'm not saying they're bad, but what I'm saying is when you're overly attached to that so much to the point where you can't let yourself flow with the unknown and you can't let the energy reveal itself to you and you can't let yourself be shown the next step to take, that's when you block yourself from the growth. And then that's when you have resistance because you're like, well, what if this doesn't happen? What is that going to mean about me? And it then becomes a reason why you make yourself wrong or go back into your operating from wounding, from your core wound of there's something wrong with me, or I'm not good enough, or shame or guilt or whatever it is. And then you block the flow of energy from moving through you. And that's when things slow down. So I think that's one of the other blocks or resistance that people have to this work is the idea of the unknown and not knowing how to trust that. And rightfully so. You know, I think that when you have had trauma in your past and you've had people in your life that have disappointed you, where you've had people in your life that didn't treat you well, or people that have hurt you, or people that you thought you could trust who betrayed you, then rightfully so, it can be scary to trust the unknown, you know, because it's like, well, why would I trust the unknown? Everything that happened so far in my life fucking hurt me, you know? And that is a very valid question and it's a very valid place to be. However, when you face those things and we get to the core wound and we understand how the core wound, those other things that happen were just an expression of the core wound. And when we address it, and you start to process all of those feelings, then you gradually get more and more comfortable trusting the unknown because you ultimately realize that even though all of those things that happen may have been hurtful or they may have felt like the rug was being pulled out from under you, ultimately they all came together to get you to where you are now. Because like from a higher perspective, even though you might have been hurt or traumatized, ultimately all of those experiences inform the person you are now, the work you're meant to do in the world, the frequency you hold, what you're meant to share. It's like all part of it. Because, you know, I'll always have clients who they have a business or in the certification or whatever, and they're like, well, I'm still working through all this stuff, so why would anyone want to work with me? And I'm like, well, that's exactly why they'd want to work with you. I'm like, would you want to work with me if I never had to work through any trauma? If I had never gone down this path on my own, would you want to work with me? No, that would make no sense. Like, people want to know that you have walked the path on your own and you have come out on the other side. So in order to become who you know you're meant to be or walk down the path you want to walk down, facing those things and going through those experiences that are hard is part of it. You know, it has to be. So when you're able to look at it like that, then it becomes a lot easier to trust the unknown, because even if something happens that is quote unquote bad or hurtful or not what you wanted, you can ultimately trust that even though you don't see it right now, there is a reason for it. And again, I get the nuance to this. I get that there's like awful things that happen that feel like they don't have a meaning and shouldn't have happened. And I get that. And that is a perspective, especially when things happen. However, from a higher perspective, there's always a way that things unfold that in the purview, that thing ends up making sense. That's just my long-winded way of saying that part of doing this work is being able to, or being willing to dive into the unknown and start to build a relationship with it. That's my thought around that. And I really wanted to speak to this because I know it's something that a lot of people experience. And you can think maybe that it's about, maybe it's not the right time, or maybe I don't really have that much trauma, or maybe I don't really need to do this, or maybe I just need to learn another skill set or a strategy to start a business or whatever it is. But if you are somebody who is thinking about starting a business, I can tell you one thing for certain, which is actually running the business is somewhat easy. It's all the emotional stuff, all the past trauma, all the core wound stuff that is really what gets in the way. That's the thing that stops you from implementing any strategy you learn, the thing that stops you from showing up and sharing your gifts, the thing that stops you from taking action is this emotional stuff. And I've seen it across the board. If you have resistance to it, then just think about some of these things and think about what is really underneath of that. And also reach out to me, because I'd love to hear how this resonated for you. And if you are wondering if what you're experiencing is resistance or it's actually not the right time or whatever it is, then ask me and I'll be happy to give you my perspective on it. Just as a quick reminder, if you haven't seen me post about this, from now until the end of 2025, if you join the Metamorphosis, you get a $500 discount, and that includes payment plans or pay in full. And then when you join the certification, you get a $1,000 discount before the end of 2025. So if you're considering either one of those, it's a great time to jump in. The Metamorphosis is starting up again in January, and that is my signature program to heal and dissolve the trauma from childhood that's stopping you from creating what you want to create in your life today. And it works. The results speak for themselves. Like I said, if you show up and do the work, it works. We have a lot of proof of that. Love the Metamorphosis so much. It's everything to me. It's been going 5 years strong. So reach out to me about that. Happy to hop on a call with you. No need to feel resistance around a call. It doesn't tie you to anything. And then the certification is the Metamorphosis Method, Breathwork, and Trauma Certification, where I teach you how to implement my methodology with your clients. So you'll learn how to facilitate breathwork along with using my trauma tools to take your clients to a permanent transformation in whatever way that they desire. So you learn a very powerful skill set that I don't know that you can learn anywhere else around trauma and breathwork, and how to specifically use breathwork to dissolve core wounds, and how to specifically use breathwork to access the subconscious and bring the subconscious into the conscious to clear and dissolve the wounding that's holding people back. And certification is where it's at. My clients who just graduated are crushing it. And one thing I can guarantee is you will leave with the confidence to see clients. We also support you in starting your business, in bringing clients in and working with them. And now I also have the Mothership Business Class, which is my higher tier of the Mothership, where I support women who've gone through the certification or who have similar businesses in growing their businesses. So reach out to me about that if you're interested in that as well. I think that's it for now. I'm going to drop the link here to schedule a call with me if you are just interested in learning more about the Metamorphosis or the certification, or you want to figure out what would be the best fit for you. I'm happy to hop on a call. Again, it doesn't tie you to anything, but it's a good way to kind of see where you're at and what would be the trajectory for you in diving into this work. And 2026 is the one year, you guys. Like, it's time to focus on yourself and create what you truly desire and experience yourself in the way that you really want to. And there's going to be a lot of expansion. So I'm super excited for 2026. Okay, I will leave it there. Please reach out with any questions, schedule a call. I'm sending you all so much love, and I will talk to you soon. Thank you so much for being here. Don't forget to follow the show on Apple or Spotify, leave a review, and share the show with your friends who you know are yearning for this type of content. When you leave a review, send us a screenshot and we'll send you a $250 credit that you can apply to joining anything new in my world. You can stay connected with me by following me on Instagram at Elise_breeds. Make sure you download my clear trauma cheat sheet at EliseBreeds.com. See you next time.